The first thing he noticed was silence. Not the gentle quiet of a calm morning, but the sterile, hollow silence of a hospital room. The white walls glowed under the fluorescent lights, and the faint beeping of machines measured time in a way that felt cruelly slow. Logan Harper blinked and tried to move, but his body was foreign stiff, uncooperative, heavy. He reached for the water beside him. Even that simple motion felt like he was operating someone else's limbs. A nurse appeared, smiling professionally, but cautiously. "Mr. Harper, do you know where you are?" Her voice was calm, neutral, but something behind it was strained. Logan opened his mouth, but nothing came out. He shook his head, the movement jerky and unnatural. His mind was a haze, a fog of shadows and flickering images he couldn't quite catch. "They said there was an accident." She continued. "You were found unconscious near the downtown underpass. You've lost identification, personal effects, basically everything." Logan's chest tightened. Everything. He had no idea what that meant yet, but instinct whispered that it was literal. No wallet, no phone, no papers, no memory of why he was here. When the doctor arrived, she was brisk and clinical, clipboard in hand. "Mr. Harper, we're running tests, but we expect that most of your memory will be fragmented at first. What you've lost is significant to your home, your job, your connections, but your brain is holding on to some core fragments. That's unusual and fortunate." Logan tried to focus, tried to picture the life he had supposedly lost, but all he could see were flashes, the smell of coffee brewing in a kitchen he couldn't remember, laughter in a sunlit apartment, the slam of a car door, the echo of a man yelling. Flashback hit him suddenly. He saw himself rushing through traffic one evening, carrying boxes out of a small office. He remembered stacks of paper, the smell of ink and old leather, a handshake with a colleague, someone whispering, "Make sure he doesn't find out." The memory was too fragmented to make sense, but the sting was there. Something had gone horribly wrong, and the people he trusted had turned against him. When the hospital discharged him with nothing but a bag of clothes, Logan felt the city breathing around him. He stepped into the streets, the late afternoon sun hitting the glass towers, casting long shadows across sidewalks. He felt strangely familiar with the streets, like his feet remembered a world his mind couldn't. He wandered past the corner deli, the diner with the cracked neon sign, and the old gym he used to visit. Faces blurred by time, some friendly, others wary. The first clue came unexpectedly. At the diner, the waitress froze. You're back," she whispered. Recognition flickered in her eyes, a mixture of shock and fear. Logan didn't respond. He just nodded, letting the moment linger. Something inside him stirred the fragments of memory that refused to be stolen. He began retracing his life in small steps. Apartment buildings, grocery stores, the route to a gym he didn't remember joining but somehow felt connected to. Every step was a question mark, every encounter a puzzle piece he had to fit together at night. He sat alone on a rooftop overlooking the city, watching traffic flow like a river of lives he no longer fully knew. He remembered the arguments, the whispers, the sense that someone powerful had decided to erase him not just from their world, but from his own. He remembered the smell of burnt coffee on rushed mornings. He remembered a promise, faint and delicate, spoken in a dimly lit kitchen. "I'll protect you." The memory was sharp like a dagger through fog. It was proof that while everything else could be taken, some things were beyond reach. For the first time, Logan felt a spark, a sense of purpose. They had taken his life, his possessions, his identity, but they had underestimated him. Memory, he realized, was power, and Logan Harper had power left to reclaim. Logan's first few nights out of the hospital were strange, like walking through a city that recognized him better than he recognized it. The sidewalks hummed with life, the scent of roasted coffee beans and street pretzels mixing with exhaust fumes. He walked without a plan, letting instinct guide him. Each street corner, each traffic signal seemed like it remembered him, whispered fragments of a life someone else had tried to erase. At the corner of 5th and Main, he noticed a man in a dark suit watching him. There was a subtle intensity in the man's posture, the kind that only appears when someone knows they are being observed. Logan felt no fear. Something deep within him, the part that had survived the accident and the betrayal, recognized the weight of the threat. He kept walking, letting the man's gaze linger like a shadow at his back. He spent the day revisiting his former neighborhood. The office where he had worked was still there, but the windows reflected strangers inside. The sign above the door read Harper and Fields Enterprises, though the interior bore no trace of him. A secretary at the reception glanced at him, puzzled. "Can I help you?" she asked. Logan simply smiled faintly, as if acknowledging a ghost. Flashback hit him as he stepped onto the elevator. Months earlier, a heated argument with a colleague had spiraled out of control. Papers had been strewn across the floor. Voices had escalated. Logan had threatened to expose financial mismanagement, and someone had quietly vowed that his life would end, not literally, but in terms of career and identity. That moment had been the start of the unraveling he hadn't understood until now. The evening found him at a small coffee shop that he felt inexplicably drawn to. The barista recognized him immediately and froze. She whispered, "You're Logan." He nodded and took a seat near the window, watching the city move past. From the street, shadows of people walked by, each absorbed in their own world. Logan realized that while the world had moved on without him, he was still tethered to it by memory alone. He began piecing together his life using small fragments, receipts, street names, the subtle rhythms of the city. They all acted as breadcrumbs. At night, he would write down what he remembered: names, dates, conversations. Slowly, a picture emerged of the people who had betrayed him and the web of deceit that had been spun. Among these fragments, one name stood out: Carter. Logan didn't fully remember him, but something about the name carried weight. Carter had been a partner, a friend, someone who should have been loyal. Yet the flickers of memory hinted at lies, whispers, and conspiracies. The realization made Logan's jaw tighten. Someone had orchestrated his erasure meticulously. It wasn't random. As days passed, Logan began testing the city, observing reactions to his presence. Employees at businesses he once frequented avoided eye contact. A cab driver subtly steered away when he tried to hail a ride. Each small confirmation bolstered his resolve. They wanted him gone, but he had something they could never steal: the memory of what truly happened. And memory, he realized, could be as dangerous as any weapon. By the end of the week, Logan had a plan forming in his mind. He would approach each fragment of his old life cautiously, silently observing and waiting for the right moment. He wasn't driven by anger, not yet. This was about reclaiming the life that had been stolen, piece by piece, and using his memory as a map to find the truth. The first step, he decided, was to uncover who had been responsible for taking everything from him. Logan's investigation began subtly. He returned to the office district, taking care not to draw attention. The sleek buildings reflected the fading sunlight, a reminder of the life he had lost. Inside the elevator, he observed people who once worked alongside him, faces familiar, yet distant. He noted their positions, their demeanor, and how easily they had moved into the spaces he had left vacant. A receptionist named Marcy hesitated when he asked about former colleagues. Her nervous glance said more than words. "Most people moved on," she said, her voice dropping. Logan nodded, masking the surge of emotion rising within him. He had expected this. People adapt. Life continues. But some truths remain buried until someone remembers them. That night, Logan wandered the streets of the city's downtown area. Neon signs reflected in puddles from an earlier rain. The hum of traffic and chatter of pedestrians created a rhythm that oddly comforted him. As he walked, flashes of his past life returned late, nights poring over contracts, celebratory dinners, conversations with friends he could no longer name. Every memory was a shard of clarity piercing the fog of erasure. He stopped at a small Italian restaurant, one he had frequented often. The maitre froze upon seeing him, recognition flashing across his face. Logan didn't speak. He simply observed. The man quickly turned away, muttering something under his breath. That single acknowledgement confirmed what Logan suspected. Someone had feared him even in absence. His memory was a threat. Flashback. Logan remembered the confrontation before it all fell apart. Carter and a few other associates had cornered him in the office, voices raised, eyes hard with intent. He had threatened to expose their manipulation, their embezzlement. One of them, a woman whose name escaped him, whispered that they would remove him quietly, making it seem like an accident. Logan remembered thinking at the time, "I will survive, but at what cost?" He hadn't known then. Logan's nights became consumed with mapping the betrayal. Names, faces, incidents all cataloged meticulously in his notebook. Memory was no longer just survival. It was strategy. He began noticing patterns in the city. A man who avoided eye contact on Main Street, a taxi driver who subtly shifted routes, a restaurant manager who looked away. Each small clue stitched together a network of deception. His apartment, modest but clean, became his base of operations. He cooked simple meals, grilled chicken, fresh vegetables. Coffee brewed in a familiar way, rituals that grounded him in reality. Friends from before had disappeared, either intimidated or persuaded to distance themselves. Logan didn't need them. His focus was precision, patience, and observation. One night, while observing a construction site from a rooftop, Logan noticed movement below. Figures familiar from his fragmented memories spoke in hushed tones, gesturing toward a ledger of some kind. Recognition sparked within him. This was no longer just about recovery. It was about reclaiming what had been stolen, piece by piece, and exposing the people who had dared to erase him. Asterisk, by the following week, Logan had mapped the web of betrayal. Each person who had benefited from his absence became a target for scrutiny. He wasn't reckless. Every step was calculated. The city's streets, once foreign, now guided him with familiar turns and landmarks. He felt like a ghost, navigating a world that had tried to forget him. One afternoon, Logan visited a high-rise building where Carter now held meetings. He lingered outside, observing from a distance. Through the glass walls, he could see familiar faces, people who had once been his allies. The realization struck him. The life that had been taken was still alive, manipulated by others who assumed he was powerless. Flashback. Logan remembered the day he discovered financial discrepancies. The first crack in the foundation. Carter had assured him it was nothing, that he was overreacting. Logan's instincts told him otherwise, but his evidence had been subtle, hidden in plain sight. That oversight had led to his erasure. Inside, he observed Carter and his associates, noting body language, subtle glances, and unspoken tension. They believed themselves secure. Logan's memories, however fragmented, allowed him to anticipate their moves. Each smile, each nod, each whispered comment became a piece of the puzzle. He wasn't just reclaiming what was his, he was becoming untouchable. At night, Logan reviewed his findings, writing detailed notes, sketches, and timelines. Memory was weaponized. Each recollection sharpened his understanding. The people who had taken everything underestimated the one thing they couldn't: the persistence of memory. And the human instinct to survive and reclaim what is lost. Logan's patience was no longer passive. Every day, every fragment of memory, every observation sharpened him like a blade. He had learned the city's rhythms, the predictable habits of the people who had stolen his life. The streets, once confusing and alien, were now his domain. Every doorway, every sidewalk, every familiar cafe offered intelligence, not comfort. One morning, Logan noticed a familiar black sedan tailing him as he left the apartment. He didn't panic. Memory guided him. He ducked into an alley and emerged blocks away, watching through the reflection of a shop window. The sedan circled and disappeared. They were watching, waiting for him to slip. Logan smiled faintly. They were underestimating him again. His first direct confrontation was carefully orchestrated. He arranged a meeting at a quiet cafe, posing as an investor interested in a local startup. Carter walked in, unaware he was speaking to Logan. Recognition flickered in his eyes, subtle but unmistakable. Logan held the moment, calm, composed, letting the realization sink in. Mr. Harper. Carter's voice was strained, polite, almost rehearsed. Logan smiled, leaning back slightly. Long time, Carter. The conversation was mundane at first, but every word, every gesture was measured. Logan asked questions, noted reactions, and observed discomfort when financial irregularities, small details only Logan would know, were mentioned. Carter's associates tensed, unease spreading across the table. Logan didn't need to reveal everything. Memory itself was enough to unsettle them. Flashback. Logan remembered the late-night meeting where he first discovered the plot. Carter and the others had laughed at his warnings, dismissing him as paranoid. They had thought removing him was simple. A brief smile crossed Logan's face. How little they understood the resilience of memory. As he left the cafe, Logan felt a new sense of power. They had stolen his life, but not his mind. They had underestimated the one weapon no one could take: his memory. The awareness of their fear gave him a quiet satisfaction he had never known before. That night, Logan stood on the rooftop overlooking the city. Neon lights reflected in the puddles from earlier rain, casting shards of color across the concrete. He remembered the sound of his own heartbeat during the accident, the sharp taste of blood and metal. Every fragment of memory he had reclaimed reinforced a single truth: they could take possessions. Homes, jobs, even names, but not the essence of who he was. Asterisk, the final revelation came quietly. Logan traced a ledger hidden in a safety deposit box or piece of evidence no one had thought he could recover. Each entry revealed betrayal after betrayal, forged documents, transferred assets, false identities. They had attempted to erase his entire existence, but memory had preserved the details. It had kept him alive, connected, and armed with truth. The confrontation was inevitable. Logan returned to the high-rise where his life had been stolen. Carter and his associates gathered, faces pale, voices uncertain. Logan walked into the room calmly, each step measured, controlled. No anger, no need for theatrics. His presence alone commanded attention. "They thought they could erase me," Logan began, voice steady, resonant. "They took my home, my company, my life. But they underestimated one thing." He paused, letting the words settle. "Memory is not so easily stolen." Gasps and murmurs filled the room. Logan presented the evidence documents, photographs, recordings, everything they had assumed lost. Faces fell, guilt and fear mixing with disbelief. Their confidence crumbled as memory became the instrument of justice. Logan's past was no longer a victim. It was a weapon. Flashback. Logan remembered the first night after waking in the hospital. The hollow silence, the sterile white walls, the fragments of life that refused to be erased. Each memory had been a seed of survival, and now it had blossomed into truth, vindication, and power. Logan walked through the city streets afterward, the urban landscape familiar and alive. Neon signs, street vendors, traffic lights, late-night diners, they were his again, not as a ghost, but as a man who had reclaimed his existence. He passed the diner where the waitress had first recognized him. She smiled cautiously. Logan nodded, a silent acknowledgement of the journey they both witnessed. The city had tried to erase him. Memory had kept him alive. It had guided him, sharpened him, allowed him to reclaim everything they had taken, legally, morally, and spiritually. Logan's life was no longer just surviving. It was thriving, built upon the fragments that had never been lost, in the quiet moments. He reflected on trust and betrayal, on loyalty and pride. He understood now that memory is the ultimate refuge. Possessions, titles, even people can be taken, but the truth held in the mind sharpened. Precise and indelible remains untouchable. Logan Harper was not just a man who survived. He was a man reborn, forged from loss, guided by memory, and unstoppable in his reclamation. Standing at the edge of the city skyline, Logan breathed deeply. The wind carried the distant sounds of life, traffic, and laughter. Memories of those lost moments danced in his mind, not as pain, but as power. They had taken everything from him, except his memory, and that was everything.